I swam in my first meet 3 weeks after I delivered, and was very upset. I was 2 seconds off my best time, and the head coach, Michael, was like, "Do you realize you just had a child?" And I think we did a role reversal, because before he was the guy, and I think I was sort of being the guy at that point. But I had fun, and my partner had said, there's a meet in 3 months. Why don't we go to that meet? It's the Masters World Championships. I'm like, okay, great. And decided to train for about an hour 3 times a week, and showed up Masters World Championships and swam kind of fast. I actually qualified for the 50 at Olympic trials, which I wasn't trying to do. But out of the 5,000 swimmers that were at this meet, and let me tell you, it's the biggest meet I've ever been to in my life. And they actually do it in 2 separate pools. They swim the women in one pool and the men in another pool. And out of these 5,000 swimmers, about 5,000 swimmers came up to me and said, "Oh, it'd be great to have a 40-year-old in the Olympics. Oh, well, you should just go do this." And I'm like, what are these guys talking about, And I just swam one event. I started thinking about all the stuff that it would take. And after just a couple days of people coming up to me, I was like, all right, okay, I'll do it, I'll just do it. And so it wasn't like some big light bulb went off in my head, and I'd be like, oh, this, I got to do this, this, and this. I was like, yeah, fine, okay, I'll train for it, And that's how it happened. And it's funny, you run into 2 kinds of people when you decide to do something like this. I remember going to New York. I was on the board of the 2012 New York committee trying to get the games to New York in 2012, and became friends with a lot of people. And one of my friends was Mayor Bloomberg. And I had lunch with him one day, and I said, well, there's something I want to tell you. And he's like, what? And I said, well, I want to make a comeback. And his first response to me was, aren't you too old for that? I was like, so you have that one, and then you have another one like Dick Ebersol, where you go in and start talking to him, and you tell him about, this wonderful dream of trying for a 5th Olympic team, and he's like, oh, that's fantastic, I think that's great, you follow your dreams, this is wonderful. So there were definitely two types of people when I decided to make my comeback, no gray area. But you know what, I remember going to my first workout, and you're in for a long haul when you're in the pool and you're with 15, 16-year-olds, and they're talking about possibly piercing their ears and what they should wear to their homecoming. I was like, oh my gosh, I have this for a year and a half, 2 years. So that was interesting, swimming with teenagers again. But it was fun, and people ask how I did this, and it's very simple. I didn't do this by myself. This wasn't just me doing this. I surrounded myself with the best people in their fields, and I had the best stretching trainers, the best strength and conditioning coach, the best swim coaches, the best massage people. I felt like if I was going to do something special, I needed these special people around me to do what I wanted to do. And I was very fortunate that I had sponsors to be able to do this, and they helped me. There's no... It's not just a single person's effort. It was a team effort for me, and I appreciate everything that they've done for me. I just wanted to read a little something. In 1960 Olympic Games in Rome, Wilma Rudolph was declared the fastest woman in the world. And what very few people remember is she was a woman of enormous grace and dignity. She wore braces on her legs until she was 12 years old. Later in life, she wrote, no matter what accomplishments you make, somebody helps you. And it speaks to the connections among us that make us excellent or leave us simply average. Now, Wilma Rudolph, by the way, found her strength in her family. Of her illness, she said, the doctor said I'd never walk. My mother said I would, so I listened to my mother. Isn't that true? Yay, mothers out there, yeah. It was an unbelievable experience to be back swimming again, going to Olympic trials, competing against young kids. I remember the first meet I swam in. I was in Rome, an international meet, and this coach came up to me after my first race and said, oh, Dara, it's just so great to see you swim. And I thought he was going to continue to compliment me, and I was kind of liking it. And instead he says, my swimmer was in your race. I'm like, oh, that's great. And he said, she came up to me after the race, and she said, you know what, Coach, that Dara, she's older than my mom. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I think that was true for a number of swimmers in the Olympic trials and all the races I swam in. But it was great being back. It was fun to be competing at the top level. The Olympic Games it happens every 4 years, and it happens every 4 years for a reason. And you have the best athletes in the world come to this one games, one athletic event, and you compete at the highest level, and it's such a rewarding feeling. And you just, as a 41-year-old, you see things differently through your eyes than you do, say, for example, my first Olympics when I was 17 years old. You appreciate things more. You're more aware of things, more cognizant of things. You approach things differently. And I know one of the things, I was in the ready room, which is the area that they showed it on the screen when I was drinking something or whatever, and it's where all the athletes hang out and before you swim. And if you're not there 15 minutes before you swim, you get disqualified. And it's just funny because you can see the difference between me and, say, Kate Campbell, who's 16 years old, who I swam against in the finals and got third in the 50. There's just a maturity level difference. And it's not to say that I don't get as nervous as I did as my first Olympics when I was 17 years old. I mean, I think before each swim I felt like I was going to throw up. But I channel it differently. And having that experience, getting up on the blocks, knowing what I know from swimming in previous Olympics, was a huge advantage to me. So people can talk about my age, but it really was an advantage for me. I learned about sacrifice, hard work, dedication. I also learned that the water doesn't know your age, and I just know that you shouldn't put an age limit on your dreams. And one more thing I wanted to read. Marian Wright Edelman is a great American woman and the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, and she wrote, "I'm really grateful to have something that I'm passionate about and that is important to me." She says, "You're not obligated to win, you're only obligated to keep trying and do the best you can." And I think that's great advice because we don't win every day. And some days you simply have to celebrate the silver, and trust me, I know that. Boy, do I know that by 100th of a second. And I actually brought one of my medals. And there's one last thing I wanted to say. This was from these Olympic Games. And there's one last thing I wanted to say, and that is, I'm sure you guys have all heard that Lance Armstrong is making a comeback. And I was honored that he had mentioned my name about that if a 41-year-old like Dara Torres can do it, he can do it. And I was very honored by that. And I started to think about the Olympic Games and sort of, I didn't have a lot of time at that point to reflect on it. And in the last few days I've been reflecting on it. And I realized that getting these medals are great. It's a nice icing on the cake. But there's a lot more rewarding things that come out of an Olympic Games. And for me, it's the fact that I felt inspired by people who came up to me and told me their stories, and they felt inspired about my story. And that is what's rewarding. And for me, that's what comes out of Olympic Games that I appreciate the most. I mean, like I said, these medals are great, but it's the experiences you learn while you're there. And I just had an unbelievable time, and I appreciate you guys letting me come here and talk to you a little bit. And thanks for cheering so loud. I think I needed just a few more of you to cheer for me to get that last 100th of a second in my 50. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.